like this weird body language. I'm waiting for the red thing to come on. Oh, it started already. Wonderful. Okay, so basically what this task was to create a timeline of events from 1857 to 1902. But I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball at the beginning. I'm starting with some context here. Okay, so I think this is important. So why did the British get involved in South Africa? Well, the first reason was strategic. Okay, it provided a good trade route to India prior to the Suez Canal being built. So you think you get lovely spices and textiles from India. Okay, loads and loads of trade there. But it was very hard. You had to go around the bottom of Africa, the Horn of Africa, as they call it, and it's a very long journey. So what people need to do is stop off. Now, actually, the Dutch were very famous for having an adept navy. So they actually colonized the Cape before the British. All right, but what did the Dutch do? Very naughty. They joined in with Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars. So very silly of them. And so essentially, the British seize the Cape Colony and they take it in 1806. And this obviously has a lasting legacy, a lasting problem, because there's already a lot of Dutch settlers who live there who call themselves Boers, okay, and feel they have a greater claim to the land than the British and even the pre-existing indigenous population. But there you go. Okay, so that creates a bit of a problem. Now, also a bit of context into this, what I call Game of Thrones. What I find interesting about South Africa is that you have kind of three competing power bases. You have the Zulu Empire, you have the Boers, and you have the British Empire. I find that fascinating because each kind of engage in subterfuge against the other, and there's like kind of temporary coalitions between those three power bases. So I find that really interesting. Okay, so Shaka Zulu from 1816 to from 1826. He founds and expands the Zulu Empire and creates a formidable fighting force. So although they don't have technology, they have very great discipline, okay, mass numbers, and just unbridled athleticism, okay? Like those Zulu Impi warriors, they could run a marathon in a day easy. It was like nothing to them. I wouldn't say nothing, but, it was very easy for them to do it. So they're actually very mobile as well, okay? They and as we know, they provided a great challenge for both the Boers and the British. Right, now this is what I find from 1835 to 1840, what I call the Great Trek. Okay, we're not talking about Star Trek. I don't know if we've got any Star Trek fans in here, but live long and prosper. But anyway, now what we're talking about, okay, is actually an exodus of those Dutch Boer settlers who don't want to live under British rule. Now you've got to consider why. What's going on? Well, the backdrop of this is that the British Empire has finally completely outlawed slavery in the 1830s. Now, actually, this slow process had started from 1700s from a court case in Britain to actually end making slavery illegal, but not the slave trade, etc. And then eventually you get this slow reform process, but by the 1830s, slavery is done. Okay, so the Dutch Boers have a much more aggressive attitude towards slavery and want to maintain it. All right, and then what do we see? We see that Britain annexes Natal, okay, which used to be a Dutch settler colony. All right, so you can see that the British is continually expanding, and the Boers are trying to get away and take their own land. Okay, so what you're actually seeing is a pattern of an ebb and flow of the status of the Dutch Boer settlers. Were they wanting to integrate into a British Empire, or do they want to be independent? Okay, and they're kind of more verged on being independent. So British grant limited self-government to the Transvaal, and then Natal separates from the Cape Colony after in Annex 93. As I say, there's an ebb and flow there, okay, between the Boers and the British. And that takes us up to 1856. It provides quite a good context, right? Now, what I find most interesting is, as I said, I was talking about this earlier in class, the nature of man, okay, or humans, okay, and greed. Greed is often, or trade, shall we say, is often at the heart of things, okay? The discovery of diamonds in Kimberley in 1867 was monumental. It provided a great impetus to the Zulus, the Boers, and the British to want to have a dominance over that region. As we know, highly significant individuals emerged from this, and I should have really put him on here. Cecil Rhodes in 1888. He has the biggest mining corporation, De Beers, okay, in the world. And I think they almost had a virtual monopoly over the trade. So it provides a great reason for the British a greater interest in that. Now, 1877 becomes a key year. Sir Bartle Frere becomes High Commissioner. Now, you cannot forget Sir Bartle Frere, because Lord Carnarvon has given him a mission, right? What Lord Carnarvon wants is for Sir Bartle Frere to unify South Africa under British rule. Now, this ambition in 1877, it doesn't actually materialise until 1910. Okay? So that's a long time. So this is a long-held British strategic ambition in this region. He sends Sir Bartle Frere and another man called Sir Theophilus Shepstone as well, okay, with this plan. And he says to Sir Bartle Frere, if you do this, you'll effectively be promoted and be like a consul general. You'll be the same as like Evelyn Baring was in Egypt, but later on, okay? Right, because those timelines don't actually match. But anyway, I'll give you an example. All right, so Lord Carnarvon, who is the Secretary of the Colonies, gives him this mission. And he embraces this. And this is why we have this expansionism, because he's been given a direct mission. Now, often we say the man on the spot is the most influential. Sometimes the colonial secretaries take a more overt position. Radical Joseph Chamberlain is one of those people, and Lord Carnarvon is as well. So what we see really between those two colonial secretaries over two different periods, okay, is a continuity of jingoism, bellicosity, and expansionism in the region of South Africa, underpinned by motivations for trade. Now, diamonds were found there in 1867, but maybe I should have put this on the timeline as well. 1873, Britain has undergone a long depression. Economy is dwindling and reducing. And as Hobson said in his analysis of economics, imperialism requires expanding territories. Okay, so the way to offset that economic deficiency is to expand into markets. Okay, and you can see clearly this is what the British has done. So I often have said, and Alex has said as well, okay, that socioeconomics is at the heart of history. It's the driving force. So Britain's entered a long depression. Is it then any coincidence in 1877 Sir Bartle Frere is given a mission to unify South Africa under British rule, with all those diamonds that they've got there? Okay, so Britain annexes the Transvaal due to Sir Theophilus Shepstone's orders from Lord Carnarvon. So you're seeing this expansion, this bellicosity here. In 1877, British defeat the Xhosa tribe, okay, in the Xhosa Wars, all right? First war there. The British annex Zulu Empire after the Anglo-Zulu War. Last lesson we looked at that in a lot of detail, okay? We know it wasn't just an easy victory. We know about the Battle of Alarwanda, Rorke's Drift, and eventually taking the Zulu capital there. Right, and in 1881, Britain is humiliated in the Boer conflict. In the first, it's called the First Boer War. Now, I had a very, very adept history student last year, and he said it wasn't a war; it was only 3 battles. Okay, but you know those 3 battles are called the First Zulu War, right? And Britain's humiliated. Okay, the strongest, largest, greatest, mightiest empire the world had ever seen. Okay, at that point, all right, or ever, humbled by these Dutch farmers. And I've said, on the other hand, let's be balanced as historians. Those Dutch farmers, those Boers, okay, they were actually a very tough fighting force. Okay, there were 60,000 of them. They were all very, very skilled on horseback. They're all very, very skilled at shooting because they have to go hunting. They understood the land. They understood the elements. Okay, they had a commando system, which meant they were highly efficient. Okay, so we shouldn't really underestimate them. But you know, Britain did have the largest empire in the world. Maybe they should have been able to rise that challenge a bit better. And then in 1886, gold is discovered in the Transvaal. Now, that's a bit of a double whammy, isn't it? South Africa doesn't just have loads of diamonds. South Africa has loads of gold. So we get another rush for territory, okay? So the British start to look at the Transvaal with greedy eyes. Yum, yum, yum. I'd like a bit of this gold. It seems quite good to us. They would like it indeed. Yes, Ryan?
So can you email Miss Luther, please?
I will do. Yeah, I will do that. Okay, right. So in 1895... the Jameson raid fails to conquer the Transvaal. So this is quite a bit later, and you can see this is the continuity because Radical Joseph Chamberlain is currently the Secretary of the Colonies, and we know that he had his finger in this pie. Okay, now that's not very academic. You can't really write that in exams. So what am I saying that by finger? I'm saying he has an influence here. We know that with that Jameson raid, he and Cecil Rhodes both engineered it together. We know that Lord Salisbury effectively covered up for Joseph Chamberlain because it was a corrupt thing to do, okay, to try to invade the Transvaal in that way. Because what they were trying to do was just send a small unit of British Army soldiers in and hope that the British citizens in the Transvaal, the Uitlanders as they were called, would join the uprising. But they didn't want to do that. Now, what caused that? Well, Kruger, who was the leader of the Transvaal, had set very high taxes on dynamite because he didn't want too many British people living in a Dutch colony. All right. So again, socio-economic causes. And we have the Second Boer War, which was a protracted British victory, perhaps a Pyrrhic victory, perhaps not. Okay, history can be the judge of it. Also known as Joe's War, caused the khaki election, had massive consequences. But by 1910, there's a union of South Africa. It's under British rule. That long-term British ambition has been realised, but you've got to ask, at what cost? At what cost did the British dominate South Africa? Okay, costly wars, humiliation, looking like a PR disaster, looking like the bullies of the world, bullying a bunch of Dutch settlers. Okay, was it worth it? Was it worth it? Perhaps it was. Look at all that gold. Look at those diamonds. Look at the strategic value of South Africa. If there's ever problems with the Suez Canal, there's a longer but safe route to India. Yeah, perhaps it was worth it. Yeah, you are the historians. You have to evaluate and judge that. Okay, I'm going to stop this video now. Stop recording.